So this is our first AppLink project, and as you can see we have the default.aspx page, which is the first page ASP.NET creates for us. We're currently viewing the ASPX, which is the markup HTML for the page. We can add controls to this page or anything we want to do. We also have a code behind page here, and this controls all of the code that's going to execute along with the page events. So as you can see, we can execute code during page load, when the page renders, when the page posts back, and all that stuff. We'll get into more detail on that later. So let me go ahead and delete this page because we won't be using it. Okay, we'll go ahead and add a new web page. It's called a web form. And we'll just type in phase 1 as our first AppLink name. So here's the HTML for our phase 1 ASPX page. Let's go ahead and look at the code behind page real quick. Now you can see currently I'm inheriting from the system web UI page. For this first AppLink, we're not going to be able to communicate to the configurator at all, so we won't have any interaction with the configurator as far as option value changing and things like that. But we can still do something very basic. We'll go ahead and change the title to be phase 1, and we'll start off with a rather traditional first project. Now we're ready to build, but before we build, I always like to do something with my new projects, which is to go into the properties, go to build, and up here you see this configuration area. We can select if we're in debug builds, release builds, or for all configurations, which is what I'll select. And all I'm going to do is come down here to the output path and set it to the parent directory and a bin folder. And the reason I do this is because by default Visual Studio will output debug assemblies in a different folder than it outputs release assemblies, and sometimes you get an object folder in there, and it can be kind of confusing where your latest changes are. So I like to make sure I know where everything's building so that I don't accidentally miss any of those changes. So with that, let's go ahead and build our project. And now what we're going to need to do is move our AppLink into the configurator project so that the configurator can see and call into our AppLink. So I'll come into here. We're set up as live demo and a few AppLink folders. And you see our bin folder here. I go into that and you see two files. One is the assembly that we just built from our project, and the other is a PDB file. And a PDB file contains all of the debug information we need so that when we throw an exception, we can see the stack trace, we can see line numbers, and overall it's pretty helpful to have around. So I'll go ahead and copy these two guys, and then we're going to find the configurator project and move these assemblies into it. So I'll go to Program Files, we'll select our company name, which in this case is Colby & Colby. We'll select our instance, which is ProQuote. We'll select C3G, which is the configurator folder. I'll go into the web project, and we'll go into the bin folder. And this is where I would paste those two assemblies. As you can see, I already have those two assemblies there, so we're going to leave them in place. Now there's one more thing that we need to move, and that is the ASPX page that we just built. So we'll copy the phase1.aspx page, and we'll go back to the configurator project in web, but this time we're going to go to Resources, AppLinks, and we'll paste that ASPX page right here. So we have our AppLink all set up and the configurator can view it. All that's left now is to write some rules to call into our AppLink. So I'll come into Design Studio and I'll go ahead and create a new part. And let me just set this prefix so we don't have any problems. And I'll create a let me check out first. I'll create a condition to group our rules. I'll go into the configuration variables, and we're going to create a phase 1 variable name so that we can use that as our screen option on the screen that will call into the app link. One important thing to note is that since we're building this app link for 6.0, we can only specify alphanumeric as a data type for an item that we want to update from an app link. Now currently this is a support case and we're working through it to fix that, but I just want everybody to know that for right now, if you stick with alphanumerics as the variable to update, we won't have any problems. So we'll leave it as alphanumeric, hit apply, hit OK. We'll go ahead and create our screen rule and tie it to our condition. We'll set the title, and we'll go into the rule details and add ourselves a screen option. Now in the screen option information, you notice that we have this application link. And all we're going to want to do is type in phase1.aspx as our application link. We can go ahead and save that, and we're all set. So I'm going to go ahead and start channel sales. We'll create a new quote. Select the customer. And my parts are non-family items, but you can call into an app link from any part, family or otherwise. I'll select our demo part, jump into configuration, and you see our first screen with our screen option phase 1, and we have this icon right here, which is our application link. I can go ahead and click on that, and on the right hand side, just as we expected, we see Hello World. Not all that useful, but let's go ahead and see if we can change that. So I'll cancel configuration, go back into the AppLink project, and let me close down these windows. And let's create a new AppLink. Now because we're going to want this app link to update a single screen option with the value we get from a text box, we're going to need to add some references to this project in order to communicate to the configurator. So let me show you how to get that. We come back to our C3G web bin folder. So these are all the assemblies that make up the configurator. And we're interested in two assemblies. The first is TDCI by design configuration WebUI Processors 3. The other is TDCI by design configuration services.dll. So I'll copy both of these assemblies, and I'll go into our AppLink folder, and I'll create a new folder called References. I'll add a folder called TDCI, and I'll paste those references right here. Now the reason I moved the references up into our solution structure instead of just referring to them down here is that now we can take this solution and move it to any other machine, and we can consistently build that project. Versus if I were to reference directly into this web bin, any machine that wanted to build that solution would have to have channel sales installed. So by moving these references up here, we don't have that restriction anymore. So all we have to do now is, since we added those references into our solution structure, we just need to add them into our project. So I click on Add Reference. I'll go to Browse, go up one level, go into our References folder, and I'll go and select both of these guys.